here. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm very glad to come back here to this nice, warm church with lots of familiar people and so forth. This is one of the churches, that you feel at home anytime that you are here. Can we switch the screen to the laptop? And things have been quite busy. We have been, if you switch me here, yeah, the screen is not going. Yeah, there it is. Perfect. Oh, very good. So things have been quite busy. In fact, last year I had so many invitations to do seminar that I put them all together. And this is the way the schedule looked like just for 2 months and a half. So I actually took my whole family, and we were able to go and experience, different cultures and foods and people and so forth. But one thing is very clear: those principles of lifestyle medicine apply all over the world. It doesn't matter if you're in Asia or Australia and so forth. You violate those laws of health, you get in trouble. You do the principles that we know better of, and health, starts coming back. But because we were gone for so long, 2 months and a half, and we live up in the mountains in California, a bear came and did a hole in our home and helped himself to some healthy food in our pantry, It even opened the fridge and the freezer, and especially the maple syrup. He liked it so much. So, when a bear does that, it becomes a menace, because when he sees a home from now on, what does he think about? Food. So my neighbor had to go and call the trapper to get this bear. So they got this bear, and there was an old washing machine, so they put him in front there while we got back home. And a second bear came in, moved the washing machine, and finished what the other one had not finished, So up in where we are in Weimar, we're doing a new project that is called the Total Community Involvement, in which on Wednesday afternoons, all the staff and all the students, the institution pretty much closes, and everybody goes out to meet the needs of the community. So that the community, get to know that there is an institution there and so forth. And we are starting to see some of the first fruits. I wanted to show you a small clip. If you could play the small clip in the back, so you can see a little bit of what we are doing with that total community involvement up there in Weimar. You can put the sound.
I'm tired of being a fake Christian. I'm tired of just going through the motions and not really... I'm tired of being a fake Christian. I'm tired of just going through the motions and not really practicing what I believe.
We're college students. We hang out, we have fun, and we keep it pretty kosher. But at the end of the day, there's something missing. To call ourselves Christians is not enough. We have to live like Christ.
So 1 day a week, the Institute as a whole, staff and students, take 4 hours out of their day to go do ministry. 100% dedicated to others.
Even though it's only been a few weeks, it's already making a huge impact on our lives and on the campus. decided to go help a lady who is actually a member of the Lions Club from Colfax. She works a lot with the schools, and she actually needed some help herself in her yard.
Unfortunately, her husband passed away, and actually 3 people died of cancer in her life recently. She's fallen on some hard times, unable to keep up with the yard, unable to do a lot of these different things.
She really doesn't have anyone to help her out, so we decided to fill that gap.
Nice! Oh, beautiful.
A lot of leaves here.
You know, even though Reiki may not be the most glorious thing you can do, it's amazing how something so insignificant can make such an impact.
Doing a fantastic job.
Why are you using the word fantastic?
Because I don't even recognize the place.
I met Granny Sweet just as we were out doing outreach. We were handing out flyers for a diabetes class, and she just started opening up and pouring out her life story. She has all of these deep questions that she's wrestling with. She's like, is God really there? And I don't know if I can believe in this God. He just has some perverse sense of humor, because why would he let me go through all that I've been through? She shared with me that she was planning to move up to Oregon and take off and just try to find a better life up there. And I said, hey, well, I could bring some friends over. We'd be happy to help you out. Move all your stuff and pack. And she was just like, really? Really? Would you guys do that?
Good job, brother!
It took all afternoon, but the whole time, she was saying how she saw in us true Christians, and she hadn't seen that before.
My sisters and I are now start each conversation, well, you know, there might be a God. Because of the people that we've met at Weimar. I don't know how else to say it, but, you know, that's just the way it is when you, on the outside looking in, wishing that you had a God, but you can't really have one because you run up against something horrific. To meet Christians that aren't horrific is something truly special.
The most important work I can be doing is out there meeting people, and not necessarily poring over my nursing books. While both are important, God wants me, I think, to be on the front lines.
I pray that through TCI, we can truly reveal the true character of God and his love, and that would spark the fire to see this whole world lightened with the glory of God.
Very good. So as you can see, that's one way that we are trying to do some outreach. And Weimar is a beautiful place if you've never been there, up in the Sierra Mountains, east of Sacramento on the way to Lake Tahoe. And one of the famous things about Weimar is the famous New Start program, in which we are helping people reverse many of their diseases through lifestyle changes. Like, for example, an article, I'm the director of research there, in an article that I'm working right now for publication. It should be out in 1 or 2 months. This patient that comes to us with this bag of medication. And as a result of the lifestyle changes, he's able to reverse diabetes, hypertension, prostate problems, obesity, and many other diseases. And because of that, he had to stop taking a lot of that medication. We did the mathematics. This patient is saving $53,000 worth of medication he doesn't need anymore. Isn't that fantastic, We can buy a car, with that money, instead of the pharmaceuticals, plus the quality of his life. He was a Mormon. Today he's a Seventh-day Adventist. And our depression article also, in which we are identifying the causes of depression. And as you make those lifestyle changes, depression reverses in 98% of the cases. And we're proposing depression has causes, and as you reverse those causes, mental healing takes place. We'll be talking a little bit about that this afternoon. Don't miss that lecture. And also how we're able to help people get off their psychiatric medication as their mental health improves. One of the things we use is lavender oil. Lavender oil has the ability to help people control their anxiety without the addictive potential of Xanax and this type of medications. How vitamin D is such an important medication, such an important vitamin. You can actually live in Florida and have vitamin D deficiency. It's possible. If you don't go out, you know, and expose yourself a little bit, don't get burned, but if you don't go out and expose yourself to the sun, it's possible to go into a deficiency. How charcoal is such an important remedy for spider bites and insect bites. Works very, very good. Something that every household should have some activated charcoal. How exercise improves your fitness, and by improving your fitness, you decrease your risk of disease. Why it's so important to have a regular exercise program. How exercise not only helps with your cardiovascular side of things, but also your mental health. You know, your mental health improves. Morbid thoughts, suicidal thoughts decrease as a result of establishing a regular exercise program. And this is another one of our patients there at Weimar. Classic patient that comes to us. Patient has high blood pressure, even though he's taking 2 medications. His blood pressure is too high. A problem there with his weight, very severe obesity, and diabetic, taking multiple medications. In a matter of 18 days, after he loses 16 pounds, we had to stop the medication. He doesn't need the medication anymore, and blood sugars come down to an acceptable level, and so does blood pressure, exactly where we want it. He continues doing the changes, and in a matter of 6 months, he has lost 83 pounds. He continues doing the changes. In a matter of 9 months, he has lost 111 pounds. And when we go and check 11 months after he came originally to the lifestyle program, his blood pressure is perfect. His cholesterol is where it's supposed to be. Your cholesterol goal should be 150 or lower. His bad cholesterol, the LDL, exactly where we want it to be. It should be 75 or less, the LDL cholesterol. Prostate exam, also very good. But the most surprising number there is what is called the hemoglobin A1C. That 5.5 on somebody that does not take medication, it means he is no longer a diabetic. His diabetes reverse. One thing is a diabetic under the control of diet and exercise. That still is a diabetic. This one is not a diabetic anymore. Diabetes went into remission. He continues doing the changes, and in a matter of a year and a half, after losing 141 pounds, you can see the difference on the before and after. Isn't this fantastic? So this is what happens when you apply those principles in the real life. And this other one, we just published this recently, a couple of months ago, showing how 93% of the people with hypertension, as they come to the New Start program, they are able to stop their medication for high blood pressure. They no longer need it, or we decrease that medication dramatically in a matter of 18 days. That's how fast the healing takes place. You can find all that research there on that ResearchGate page. You can type the whole address, or you can Google Francisco, which is my other name, Francisco Ramirez ResearchGate. That should take you there to that page where you can See, more than 100 studies that we have been publishing recently. It's free, and there's absolutely nothing to be sold in any of those links. There's also a very active Twitter account, Eddie RD MD. Some people say, well, doctor, I don't have Twitter. Well, open one, it's free. One of the most efficient ways of getting information for me. And so does that YouTube page. And if you want to come and travel with me around the world, you can do so on that Instagram page. What type of things are there on that Twitter account? This one, very interesting study I just put there recently. The people that drink alcohol 3 months before conception, the males, they have a 44% risk of malformations on the heart on the baby. That's how dangerous alcohol is. And in fact, if you were drinking a lot, if you were doing binge drinking, that effect lasts 6 months, okay? From the time you partake that alcohol, the sperm, that DNA gets damaged, and you increase the risk of malformations on the baby. This one, we're talking a little bit about that at Sabbath school today. How music, one of the most excellent ways of stimulating your brain. Just make sure it's the right type of music, okay? Because the wrong type of music actually has the opposite negative effect. This other one, how living close to the ocean is good for your mental health. You guys are blessed, isn't it? Because you are kind of relatively close to the ocean here. And this other one, how spending 120 minutes a week outside has a big impact on your overall health. Don't just stay at home, you know. Put your shoes on, go outside, enjoy the beautiful nature here of Florida. That's good for your overall health. And this one, how people that do exercise 4 to 5 times per week, when you check the arteries of their heart and the whole system, they're more healthy, those arteries. Therefore, so important to have a regular exercise program. All those, you can find them on that Twitter account. And this one, sad statistic, you know how much loneliness is in this country. Scientists call that an epidemic. You know, so many lonely people. That is not good for your overall health. So that's why churches play such an important role in communities to create, you know, that connection with others and so forth. So don't miss that blessing every weekend. So let's talk about the topic of today by the name of the biology of the Sabbath. We have a fascinating inside of us mechanism of clocks. There's not only one clock, but there are multiple clocks in our bodies. And those clocks need to be synchronized with our central clock. And you know very well that we are not just like a car. If you go to your car at 2 in the morning, your car will perform the same as if you use it at 4 p.m. or at 8 a.m. It doesn't matter when you use the car works. You're not like a car. You have clocks inside of you. And you know that very well. For example, is there a time of the day when you feel hungry? Yes or no? Is there a time of the day when you are not hungry? Is there? Somebody needs to come to the New Start program. Is there a time of the day that you feel sleepy? You know? Is there a time of the day when you feel more awake? See, there's clocks inside of us that determine those cycles inside of us. So one of the most important cycles that you have inside your body is what is called the circadian rhythm. It's a daily cycle in which at night melatonin is secreted, and melatonin is one of the most important hormones that repair your body at night. But this is what I call an optional hormone. For example, if you choose not to go to bed early at night, you miss most of your melatonin of the night. So the blessing is there, but you need to choose to receive that blessing by going to bed early. In the same way, those clock genes get affected by disease. When disease is on board, it interferes with the function of those clock genes. I don't have time to talk about that this weekend. Maybe in another time we can talk more about it. But the point is that the melatonin is an important hormone. Now, there is another cycle. So circadian has the name circadian it comes from the Latin, which comes from the word circa, which means about, and dia, which means day. So circadian rhythm is a rhythm about 24 hours. Now, scientists in the field that is called chronobiology have discovered that there is another cycle that is very important. This cycle is called the circa-septum cycle. And this circa-septum cycle is a rhythm of 7 days that every living thing has in their body. Now, this cycle also, we need to learn to work with that cycle instead of working against that cycle. The same thing with our circadian rhythm, the 24-hour cycle that we have. If I violate those principles of the daily cycle, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm not going to get enough melatonin. I'm going to have problems with my sleeping patterns. And all these things get affected if I don't work with the cycle instead of working against the cycle. So one of the days that is very important in our week is the seventh day or Saturday. And it has something special that day. The Bible talks about that, Genesis 2:3. Then God, what did he do? Bless. God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. So what did God did to that Sabbath, to that seventh day? He blessed it. Now, what does blessing of that day really means? For example, if I tell you, God bless you, what does it mean? Well, it means, may you have enough money to make your needs met, isn't it? If I tell you, God bless you to my children, it means when you go to school, you get good scores, may you have a good job to sustain you and so forth. So how come if God says blessing to the Sabbath doesn't have a job, the Sabbath doesn't have money, the Sabbath doesn't have children, So what does the blessing of that day really means? Now, there is an important principle in Bible interpretation that says the following: you have to leave the Bible to interpret itself. In that way, it's not just my idea, but is really the principle behind that we discover when we let the Bible interpret itself. So if we want to go and see what is a blessing, well, we need to find blessing in the Bible. To whom was the first blessing given? Well, not necessarily to Adam and Eve. The first blessing of the Bible, we find it here. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God, what did he do? Blessed them. And notice what's next after the blessing. Saying what? Be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. So first blessing to whom? The animals. Now, what about the next blessing? To whom did it go? Now you don't want to say anything, isn't it? Yeah, it is to Adam and Eve. Okay? Genesis 1, 27 and 28. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Then God what? Blessed them. And then what does it say next? And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And then if you go a little bit further, you will find that third blessing given to someone, and that was to Noah. In Genesis 9:1, so God what? Blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. Can you see the pattern? Every time God is giving a blessing, what's next? Be fruitful and multiply. Which means that blessing is related to multiplication. Now, what's in our bodies multiplying constantly? We have our cells multiplying constantly. In fact, if those cells were not multiplying, you would be in really big trouble and you would die really soon in a matter of days. Because those cells need to multiply, because the cells die and something else needs to substitute them. In fact, the dust that you have at home that you have to clean, it's mostly cells from your skin. The more people that live in that household, the more dust you're going to have. So all the time, they're dying, their cells in your skin, and they go and float around. And then because of multiplication, new cells come about and take over that job. Some cells multiply really fast, like those in the skin. Some cells take a long time for that multiplication to take place. So we need to make copies of the instructions of the cells, and the operating manual is inside every cell, and that we call the DNA. It's basically, the manual how to operate the cell and so forth. So that manual is actually quite big. In fact, if you were to get that manual and put it out, it would be a lot of feet. How can something that is so long can be packed in such a small place that you don't even see it? I mean, this is just fantastic, the way that this is engineered. Anyhow, the same thing happens when you are copying some text or whatever. If you ever try to copy something, what's going to end up happening sooner or later? You're going to make what? A mistake. You're going to end up putting a letter that you're not supposed to, or miss a word or something. In the same way, because we live in a world of sin, the cells, when they make a copy, they need to make a copy of that manual and then they separate. When they're doing that process, mistakes are introduced. So the cells need to repair that DNA. And in fact, our understanding now is that many of those mistakes, if not corrected properly, are the result of many different diseases, including cancer. So the healing that Jesus did was focused at fixing, those mistakes that were in those cells. For example, regarding those cancer cells. In the old days, we thought that only few people got cancer cells. Did you know that every single one of us generates cancer cells every day? Now, why don't we get cancer? Most of us, because of a blessing called your immune system. Your immune system goes and checks and makes sure that those cells that have bad mistakes are destroyed, because if not, if those mistakes multiply, we get ourselves in trouble. National Geographic recently did a series of micro photographies, and you can actually observe this process. Do you see that ugly ball, big one with a lot of tentacles? That is actually a cancer. Okay. Now, do you see those fluffy white balls there? Those fluffy white balls are your immune system. Now, do you see if they have eyes or something, those cells there? How come they know that they need to be lining up there? Somebody, it's directing those cells, so that they line up where they're supposed to. And, immune cells can be very destructive. When they release those chemicals that are inside there, they can cause severe damage. Yet, the cells are usually inactive, circulating in your body, but in the same way as your computer, when you want to turn on a program, what do? You do a click, isn't it? You go and find the file that you want, the program that you want, and then you click and you turn it on. In the same way, somebody has to click that cell. Somebody has to turn on that cell so that the cell can activate and it can release, those tremendously damaging chemicals that they have. So, in the same way as your computer, you move the mouse, you find the file that you want, and you click. It activates the program and it runs. In the same way, those cells, somebody has to do the click. Now, how many programs your cell has? Every cell that you have in your body has 24,000 programs. Okay? Or as an analogy, it's like your cell phone. Imagine a cell phone with 24,000 apps. Okay? That's how many possible programs are there. Now, that means that the click is not just any random click. You need to do the click exactly on the program that you need. Okay? You don't click to go to sleep, when you need to activate the immune cell and, destruction and so forth. So the click needs to be done exactly where it's supposed to. Notice, this is the same micro photography from that cancer. Notice what ended up happening to that cancer. Do you see it now, flat as a pancake? Okay. It's completely destroyed. Now, notice also how those cells of the immune system, now they look differently. Before, they were little round, fluffy balls, remember? Now they are elongated. Now the click took place, and they were able to release those toxic chemicals and wiped out that cancer that was there in that micro photography. So, who do you think does that click? Do you think your doctor does that click? We need somebody smarter than the doctor to do that click. It's like watching a remote control car. You know, the remote control car goes and avoids the obstacles and so forth. And it's like saying, man, that's a smart car, you know. It's not crashing, you know. Is the remote control car the smart one? Who is the smart one? The one that has the controls, isn't it? That's the smart one doing those signals. Or is it like the famous dolly? Remember the dolly? You know, the first animal that they cloned, in which they had these 2 cells, which were not the usual male and female ovum and sperm, but rather it was just 2 groups of cells. And when they tried to implant these 2 cells, what ended up happening was that they multiply, and it was just the same type of cell. There was no division and specialization of the cells. So it was just a big clump of cells. So what they needed to do a click. And the way they did the click on this dolly was using electricity. And it took more than 700 attempts to get the right click. Sometimes it was too much, it would burn the whole thing. Sometimes it was not enough. So it took more than 7,000 trials until they got the exact click. In fact, you can even find the video if you look around on the internet. When a sperm and the female cell unites, there is a flash that happens. Google it. You'll find that on the internet, how that was documented. You know, there's a click there that takes place at that moment. Now, not only do we get mistakes because the cells are multiplying and we need to copy the manual, but also there are other ways we damage our DNA. For example, when we overeat, okay, that's not good. You know, there's a principle in Japan that is an excellent principle to follow. It's called the Hara Huchi Bu. That's the name of it in Japanese, which translates into eat until you are 80% full. And you get up, okay? Don't eat too much. That's one of the challenges we have here in America. You know, the country of overabundance, and it's very easy to go in the overabundance side of things, okay? So very excellent principle, the Hara Huchi Bu, okay? 80% only. Or overworking, you know, not have that temperance and so forth. Or also not enough sleep. You know, as we were mentioning, if you miss that melatonin cycle, you miss most of that melatonin of the night, and premature aging and all kinds of problems take place as a result of that. And also another thing that generates a lot of oxygen-free radicals, getting angry and upset. Okay, that's not good. Okay, you generate a bunch of oxygen-free radicals that go. These oxygen-free radicals work as thieves. They go and start stealing what doesn't belong to them. And they go to the DNA and break that DNA, stealing parts of it that doesn't belong to them. So because of that, we are in need of constant repair because those cells are multiplying and so forth. So how much reparation do we need? Think about one cell, okay? The DNA that needs to be checked is 30,000 million pairs that need to be checked in one cell. Now, that's one cell. How many cells do you have? You have more than 1 trillion cells. Not million, not billion, trillion. Okay? So if you make the mathematics, 30,000 million multiply by 1 trillion, if you put it there in your calculator, what's going to be the answer? An E. It's too long, the number. Calculator is going to crash because of how big the number is. So God needs to know from those 30,000 million pairs, God needs to know exactly where to do the click. And the click is not everywhere, you know. The click is in individual cells and so forth. I mean, the level of complexity is very big. So the reason why we're still able to multiply is because the great physician keeps helping us with the click, okay? That is the reason why we are able to multiply. So healing means to fix those damaged cells. Healing means to activate that immune system so that things that are wrong can be fixed. And the Sabbath day is a very special day because somehow God comes to the human being to do a special work of reparation. See, the Sabbath goes beyond a religious principle. It is actually a physiological principle. As you need to breathe, and you need to eat, and you need to sleep, you need that rest of the Sabbath day. So how do I know that? Because it's in the Bible. Look at this. In Exodus 28, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work. You, nor who else? Your son, daughter, male servant, female servant, and then who's there? Have you ever seen the cattle coming here to church? See, because it goes beyond a religious principle. The Sabbath is a physiological principle. Because the cow and the dog and the cat and the rabbit and so forth also live in a sin-filled world, it also means that their DNA also needs to be repaired. And that's why they also need the principle of the Sabbath so that that reparation takes place. It's as if your car has an ugly sound, you know. What do you do when your car has an ugly sound? You take it to the mechanic, isn't it? So as you go and drive to the mechanic, you arrive there and you tell the mechanic, hey, mechanic, my car has an ugly noise. What does the mechanic tell you? Turn off the car. You need to turn off the car, then the mechanic, you know, can go and do his thing there to try to figure out what's wrong and so forth. That's why God is asking us what? Turn off the car, you know. Every Sabbath, we need to turn off the car. So in the same way as the melatonin is an optional blessing, isn't it? Every day you need to go to bed early. There needs to be complete darkness so the melatonin can be secreted and reparation of your body can start taking place at night. Every Sabbath you need to choose to rest. So that special reparation takes place only on the Sabbath. Now, there was a very interesting exchange between Jesus and the Pharisees. The Pharisees didn't like that Jesus was healing people on the Sabbath. In fact, if you check the miracles, most of them take place on the Sabbath. And they go and confront the situation. Jesus, in John 5, 15, 16, The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus which had made him whole. And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him, because he had done these things on which day? The Sabbath day. But please notice the very interesting answer of Jesus in verse 17. But Jesus answered them, my Father, what is he doing on the Sabbath day? He's working, and who else is working, he says there. And therefore I'm working. Didn't we read that God was resting on the first Sabbath? What happened? It's a different world. Now we live on a sin-filled world, and we are in need of that Sabbath rest and reparation that takes place on the Sabbath. So what are they working on? What do we learn about? DNA, fixing that DNA, which is very interesting because, there are many groups that are vegetarian around the world, yet how come Seventh-day Adventists live longer than these other ones? The Sabbath, I believe, is a very important principle that answers to that. And this is not only something in humans. For example, there is this bee-like creature. It's smaller than the bees. I just saw him. I was speaking in Guatemala a couple of weeks ago, and I saw this animal. It's called the melipona. It also makes honey and so forth. And this melipona, it has been observed, especially in Brazil, how the level of work of the melipona decreases on the Sabbath compared to the rest of the week. Now, how come only melipona and not the other ones? I don't know. Maybe we haven't observed the other ones well. I don't know. But it's not the only one. Also, there is a bird in South America called the Joao de Palo, and also close to Weimar, this physician did this very interesting video. You can find it if you just Google it. It's called the 7-Day Beavers. And he started documenting the activity of the beavers, how on the 7th day, the level of activity of the beavers is much smaller than the rest of the week. This is a doctor, we're trained to observe things and make detailed observations and so forth. A very, very interesting video. I highly recommend you if you're interested in the topic. So this is something that has been published in the scientific literature. For example, in this article, it is mentioning the 7-day circa septum that we were talking about, cycles on the humans. And notice what it says here. This circa septum, or about weekly rhythms, are one of the major surprises turned up by modern chronobiology. 15 years ago, a few scientists would have expected that a 7-day biological cycles would prove to be so widespread and so long established in the living world. And those 7-day cycles are not only in humans. From the most microscopic organism to the biggest whale, every living thing has those 7-day cycles. And this is the interesting thing. For example, astronomically speaking, what is a year? When the planet Earth goes one time around the sun. What is the moon? What is the month? The moon goes around the earth. What is the day? You go around your axis one time. What is the week? If you know, say it. They're going to give you the Nobel Prize probably. Okay? See, if we don't know what happens then, nothing has been documented, yet God gave the week on the Bible, isn't it? Long time ago, he established that, and that proves, the validity of that week. In fact, it's interesting if you go and investigate communist regimes, because the seventh-day week reminds of the Bible, they try to mess around with this. And sometimes they try to make 5-day weeks. Sometimes they try to make 10-day weeks. It doesn't work. People got sick, productivity went down, and all kinds of problems were the result of that. They had to go back to the 7-day week because God programmed that in our beings. So notice this book on chronobiology. At first glance, it might seem that weekly rhythms develop in response to 7-day week imposed by human culture thousands of years ago. However, this theory doesn't hold once you realize that plants, insects, and animals, and other than humans, also have weekly cycles. Biology, therefore, not culture, is probably the source of our 7-day week. Fascinating. It is intrinsic. God programmed those things in our DNA. And one of the leaders on chronobiology is Dr. Hallberg up in Minnesota. And he started observing how there are these cycles in many things in humans. For example, somebody with pneumonia either gets better on 7 days or dies 7 days after the pneumonia. Malaria, has this crisis that change or improve depending on 7 days. Chickenpox, exactly 2 weeks after exposure, that's when you start seeing the rash and so forth. And also surgeons observe this very much, how the swelling takes place on the 7th and the 14th day after the surgery. And also, the Bible gives some principles there. When a baby was born, they needed to circumcise him 1 week after the baby was born. Why is that? Because now we know that the anticoagulant in our blood peaks at the 8th day. Therefore, it is the best time to do the circumcision. And those 7-day cycles is not just something here and there. It's everywhere in our bodies, from the acid content of our blood to our temperature to the hormones, the amount of hormones, to temperatures and all kinds of things. As you start measuring things, you will see that these things have a clear 7-day cycle. And even music, there's something special, isn't it? Because music also, we have the 7 notes that encode, music around us. And even in architecture, the most efficient use of space is an hexagon, which is 6 by a wall behind, giving you a 7. So that principle of the Sabbath is something that has been published. For example, this is a fascinating published paper that came out from Purdue University, and it was not done by Adventists, it was not done by Jewish people. What they did, they measure the levels of stress hormones on humans. And what they were able to identify is that there is a clear 7-day cycle on the levels of stress hormones. Now, stress is antagonistic with pleasure. You cannot be very, very stressed, says, oh, this is so pleasurable, isn't it? No, they're antagonistic to one to another. So you experience more pleasure when there is less stress. Now notice the text of the published paper of this study. It appears that there is a strong weekly rhythm in day-to-day mood. This pattern shows a peak around Friday night. Anybody knows what happens on Friday night? Fascinating, isn't it? Exactly when the Sabbath starts is when the levels of stress hormones is the lowest on everybody. Now you need to choose. If you want to choose to rest, those stress hormones remain low throughout the Sabbath. But if you choose not to rest, what's happening? You are interrupting the blessing that God is trying to give you. The same thing that happens if you late at night, you choose to stay up and so forth, you're missing that blessing of the nightly rest. In the same way, the same is going to happen in your body. And this is not the only study, you know. For example, in this study in which they were trying to see which days people die the most in Israel. And they found, and this is from the text of the article, a clear and significant deep peak pattern in the number of deaths around Sabbath. On Sabbath, on Israel, is the day that least people die. Okay? Fascinating, isn't it? And as I mentioned, this rhythm is inside of us, program. Another paper here on chronobiology, we hypothesize the 7-day time structure of human beings is endogenous in origin, hypothesis that is affirmed by a wide array of evidence. We also hypothesize there are representative, at least in part, of the biological requirement for what? For rest and repair 1 day each 7 days. Just as the circadian time structure is representative in part of the biological need for rest and repair 24 hours. So as you need to rest that night period every day, you need to rest that day out of those 7 days. And Sabbath is such an important principle that if you go and check languages, you will see that most of the languages on planet Earth, the Sabbath, Sabado, Sabata, and so forth, is the same pattern worldwide. How come these cultures were separate from each other, isn't it? Where did they learn this? What's the answer? The Tower of where? Of Babel. That knowledge was there, and as these different groups of people separated and so forth, they brought, that knowledge around. And notice this. This is this historian, from the time of Jesus. He was never a Christian. He was just a Jewish historian. And he documented the following in the book Against Apion. The masses have long since shown a keen desire to adopt our religious observances, and there is not one city, Greek or barbarian, nor a single nation to which our custom of abstaining from work on the 7th day has not spread. So as people saw that it's better to rest on the 7th day, they started copying this pattern around the time of the Jewish people. This was documented in the 1st century. So we have then circadian, that's 24 hours as we said. We have circamonthly, that's 30 days. We have circannual, that's 1 year. and we have circa septem, that is 7 days. And that's why Isaiah, when he's talking about the Sabbath day, notice how he uses a lot the principle of pleasure. As we mentioned to you, it is the most pleasurable day, or should be, of the week. Which day? The Sabbath day. And notice the language. If you turn away your food from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call it Sabbath at what? What's delight? A pleasure. The day, the holy day of the Lord honorable, and shall honor him, and not doing your own ways, nor finding what? Your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words, then you shall what? Delight. Again, the language of pleasure. You shall delight yourself in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride on the high hills of the earth, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father. The mouth of the Lord has spoken. So the 7th day is an extremely important day. Shouldn't be on their watch. Oh, I hope it finishes soon, the Sabbath. Don't do that, I mean, you are receiving that very special blessing, I wish it could be, even longer than that. So how can we get the most out of that Sabbath? We need to make sure it's truly the most joyful day of the week. So if we want that joy for us, what do we want also? Our friends and family to join that, to experience that joy. So the Sabbath day is special, therefore we need to prepare for that 7th day. So the day of preparation actually doesn't start on Friday, but rather it should start on Sunday, so that we can plan and make this day the most blessed day. And in closing, I want to read this quotation from Manuscript Releases. It says, "We should not lie in bed on Sabbath mornings because it is a Sabbath. We would have our preparations already the day before so that we can go to the service without the hurry and worry. We would not stroll off and have a nice time to ourselves. We wanted our children to have all the privileges and blessings of God's sanctified day of rest." Which means, don't just come for the service, receive the whole blessing, Make sure you come and participate of that worship service. So may God help us to receive that blessing that He wants to grant us. And we will be seeing each other this afternoon. Don't miss it. We'll be talking about epigenetics, how genes and habits are so interlinked, and how our habits can turn on disease genes or health genes. And we will also be talking a little bit about mental health. So may God bless you, and may you receive that special blessing.